I'm joined, as I am each month, by our own Dr. Joe Sirven, host of the Saturday WJCT program and podcast, What's Health Got to Do with It? He helps break down the latest medical headlines and takes your calls and questions on any healthcare topic. Dr. Joe, welcome.
Welcome. I'm so happy to be here for March. I can't believe we've gotten into springtime already.
I know. I can't believe it's March already. And we're so glad to have you here on the other side of the mic for a change. It's really nice to have you back. If you have a healthcare question, you would like to reach out to Dr. Joe, you can reach us on air at 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. You can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find all the ways to connect with us. So, Dr. Joe, I want to start with this question about lab-made peptides. This is now being touted as a sort of cure-all health optimizer. You have these influencers out there call themselves biohackers. First of all, what is a peptide?
I love it because I never thought that on a Monday morning I'd be talking biochemistry with you, but let's do it.
Let's do it.
So it is a biochemical term, and fundamentally what a peptide is simply a string of amino acids. It is almost like the closest thing that you would consider is that if you kept building those strings and folded them, you'd have a protein. So they're like almost like the beginning formation of a protein, but fundamentally it is a string of amino acids. For the most part, what they do is they serve as signaling. They tell a cell to do X, Y, or Z depending on what it is. Some hormones, even insulin, fits under the role of a peptide, if you will. But it is a biochemical term, and that's fundamentally what we're talking about. I just never thought, 30 years after studying this, I shouldn't be dating myself, in biochemistry in med school, that we're going to be talking about them as a thing.
It's not a drug, though. It's not a pharmaceutical?
It is not necessarily pharmaceutical, but you can make it pharmaceutical grade, if you will, if you design them. But it is literally like it's a chemical, like any type of drug, if you will. But this is that. It's literally a string of amino acids put together. And again, the body uses them in cases that we know about for signaling. But you can create a whole string of different amino acids that have either no use, no purpose, or could, at worst, create a problem for you.
Well, so some peptides that we know of that are in use, you mentioned insulin. This new generation of weight loss drugs are also often peptides, right?
Right.
GLP-1 drugs.
Some of them, yes.
Some of them.
Mm-hmm.
And those ones we know are being used largely successfully. They're being prescribed in many cases. But what are we talking about with this sort of these other peptides that people are talking about online and recommending?
So it's really come out of the world of the longevity world, if you will, which is influencers out there say, this is going to save your mitochondria. That's another cellular term that I never thought I'd be talking about as well. But this is going to save certain parts of your cell or prolong its life. And so people and these influencers create their own versions of these little peptides stringing on certain amino acids and sell them as, a wellness hack or a longevity piece. The other, that's what we're talking about. There are other, I will say, one of the more common ones for which there's evidence for, just to throw it out there, is collagen. Collagen for skin, that's a classic peptide, and there is some evidence that it could help elasticity for that. But then when you're talking about, the inner workings of other cells and things of that sort, we don't know.
Well, so some of these are being proposed as you mentioned, for younger looking skin, some for weight loss, but also mental function, injury recovery. A lot of athletes now beginning to endorse or begin to use these peptides to recover from injury. What is the risk when you're talking about something, for instance, that could boost cell production specifically? Like if you have a torn something and you're trying to advance the healing process, what's the risk there?
So here's the risk. So ultimately, everything in the human body is about balance. So if you have a natural process that something breaks down, your body tries to kind of make up for it by either regenerating cells or something along those lines. The risk is if let's say you give a signal for something that is for cells to multiply and grow. what is the most common condition that where
Mm,
cells multiply and grow? I believe it's called cancer.
yeah.
And that is the type of thing when it goes out of whack. That and you lose like and a lot of times we find out in cancer it's because of funny signaling and things of that sort. And remind you, peptides, that's what their whole purpose is. You could literally come into a situation where we don't know because we haven't studied it, where it could go very awry and send wrong signals. And then you now have a much more serious issue. Fundamentally, this is all of us taking basically the clinical trial in your own hand and making your own body an experiment. And, I don't think that's the purpose of what people do just because someone gets online and said that they've had a nice experience, but we don't know. This is just you taking matters in your own hands, if you will, your
Yeah.
own risks.
And some people are comparing this to being like a lab rat or a guinea pig to just sort of trial on an individual. I mean, there's one reason that science doesn't use anecdotal evidence. It really does rely on trials, but people are buying this stuff without really understanding or having maybe any idea the origin of it. Some of this is just being sold online without in what they call a gray market.
Yeah, so let me give you a kind of an anecdote to that. There was once an FDA audit. They don't do enough of these where they looked at a particular supplement. In this case, it wasn't a peptide one. They looked at a CBD supplement just to make sure that the products that people bought, like in the way you just described off the internet, was what they say it is. It's CBD. They found that almost 75% of it had some contaminant or wasn't even CBD to begin with. It was whatever they chose to put it. Some of it, they didn't even know what it was. And that's the point. Unless these things are not regulated, and therefore no one is watching that thing that arrives in the mail or is delivered to you is what it says it is.
But this, in many ways, to your point, isn't all that different from supplements, which already garner an enormous segment of the market in terms of health, wellness supplies, vitamins.
Yeah, that's another one that again, you hope even what you see in grocery stores and drugstores, you are kind of left a bit to the good graces and good faith of the people making it, and we all know that that isn't always the case for all. And yes, this falls under that rubric of supplements, which, by the way, is even to get a supplement, that it's safe to use and stuff, is still much less stringent in terms of the requirements that for you to be able to put that out there for supplement as opposed to a prescription med which is very strictly watched by the government in general just so that it's safe to use.
So, what do you advise people if they are using it? And obviously, it sounds like you wouldn't recommend that they do this, but if they are using one of these, what should they be? What kind of conversation should they be having with their doctors?
I think the first thing is find out, do your homework, and don't. And an influencer isn't going to be the expert. Is there trials? There are so many medical journals out there. Ask the physician, is there evidence? What's the level of evidence? We grade that. That is it there's a clinical trial for this? Someone has seen it with their patients. Ask about what exists in terms of our knowledge for that, because their unintended consequences can occur.
What if they're worried about getting scolded by their physician for taking? I mean, if they go see Dr. Joe, you're going to give them a hard time if they're taking something off of the gray market and injecting it into their bodies. But should they own up to it?
I think that I'll always own up to it. There's nothing that I have not heard in the medical office that's going to shock. I think it's easier to come clean. And if they're scolding me, hopefully you have a better relationship that they'll say that, but it's done in a manner of trying to help safety, if you will.
There's some things people could watch out for. I've seen certain symptoms of that they say are of particular concern, things like looking for injection site reactions or perhaps numbness or shortness of breathing, things like that.
Yeah, so one thing is that if you are injecting these things, please talk to your doctor about that. Injections bring in a whole new level of concern about these things. Oral things are always a problem as well, but injections, that's there's just a whole host of things that can occur with that. Please, please, please talk to your clinician, your doctor, whomever that you see.
Well, we are talking to Dr. Joe Sirven. He is a neurologist here in Jacksonville, and he will answer your questions on any healthcare topic. If you choose, you can reach us on air at 904-549-2937, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find other ways to connect with us. So there is a question we have. A question we have from Joss on Facebook saying, we're at war with Iran, right? So yes, there is certainly a war going on right now of great concern. And we're going to be talking to Dr. Joe regardless, but thank you for the comment. We appreciate it. I want to ask you just in terms of trends in physician-patient relationships, because there is I think connected to this question of whether people are using their own meds on their own regimens, a deterioration, some would say, of that relationship. And some of that is happening perhaps with a lack of trust, but also some of it may be being furthered by the official messaging that we're getting from, say, the federal government. One of those topics is something called shared decision making.
Yeah.
And there's been some increased study about what that is, how that might be influencing people's healthcare decisions. What is shared decision making?
So shared decision making is a very formal concept. It sounds like most people think you think it's basically you talking to your doctor, which it is, and making a decision based on the best evidence. But actually, shared decision making, when it came out of the Department of Health and Human Services as a concept, is when there are multiple options for care that basically the clinician that you're seeing provides all the evidence and all the options, and you choose from it when there's not a preponderance of evidence that this is the thing you must do. And so right now we hear it a lot in terms of discussions of vaccines, we want to use shared decision making. Well, that's actually a corruption of the whole concept, because shared decision making is when there's not enough evidence that you can choose one or two or three different options, and you speak to the clinician to kind of understand your risks, and then you both try to guide to pick the one that you do. Think like a cancer treatment where you could do surgery, or you could do chemo, or you could do radiation. And either of those three options are okay, but it's going to depend on what you want to do. When you're talking about it in the world of vaccines, there is a preponderance. We know that a polio vaccine works very well, and it's going to save lives. So shared decision making there, and that doesn't make sense, because there isn't other options. The other option is not to do anything. Then you get into an ethical thing of like, that's almost malpractice. Well, it is malpractice in essence to not, offer something that has a huge benefit with a very small risk. And that's where this gets very murky, if you will.
And some of the shared decision making that has been guided by this administration specific to vaccines include things like HPV vaccines, rotavirus, flu, even COVID. So that would appear to suggest that there is unresolved science, that the medical conclusions of research are up in the air, and you should be discussing it because there's not any rock solid evidence.
See, that's exactly the point, Ann. That is the exact assumption, that by putting that framework around this, it makes it seem like they have not been studied at all. But the reality is these have been fairly well studied. Certainly the classic vaccines, the polio, measles, and things of that sort. I know some of the more recent vaccines are a little younger, but they have been well established in terms of the numbers of thousands of individuals who have taken them, and more importantly, have been helped by using it. And that's why I always bristle when I hear that, because it's like, yes, of course, people need to know the risks of any type of treatment that you put into your body. I completely agree. But the evidence is overwhelmingly positive for the use of these vaccines.
And so there have been now 12 former FDA commissioners that call this a mistake. They say that this is dangerously equivocal messaging by the government about these, for instance, vaccines. But how are people to interpret that messaging from former FDA commissioners and the current administration? How are they supposed to interpret those conflicting messages?
Yeah, and this is where I think that it gets us back down to a point that we are having difficulty kind of coming out of these larger messages, and it's going to have to come back down to your private relationship with whomever you see for your care.
Mm.
I think that's what this is going to be. I've watched where I've seen medical institutions who now are following the guidance of, for instance, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and not the CDC or other agencies, with regards to vaccine recommendations for their health system, just to give you a sense of it. So this is being done at hospital level, health system level, or your private physician or care or clinician level is where we're going because of exactly what you're saying. How do you kind of tease all of this apart when the message we're so used to coming from one source is now coming from multiple sources?
Well, it's a difficult time for patients too, because you figure most people are seeing their doctor if they're relatively healthy, maybe once a year. And yet there's messages coming daily, if not hourly, on healthcare topics, not just from government officials, but also all of these trends, whether it's elimination diets, supplements, as we mentioned, all kinds of detox. People are very into, I mean, have been, but procedures that could actually cause more harm to various organs than good. And yet they're perpetually being sold something or told something.
Well, I'll give you an example to show you how the unintended consequences. Recently, I saw in a couple reports out of Australia that they had reported that scurvy, the disease that we think in pirates from the 1800s, has made a slight comeback because individuals who were taking certain medications for weight loss or things that sort, that their diets aren't being supplemented by vitamin C because they have no desire to eat it, and therefore, as a result, we see things like vitamin C deficiencies approaching,
Like scurvy?
Scurvy, the pirate disease
Wow.
of the 1800s, has made a small comeback. Vitamin B6 toxicity, that's because of all the supplementation of water and things of that sort, because people believe we need to take vitamin B6 because this is, again, influencer led,
Wow.
has led to kind of nerve damage and elements of B6 toxicity that we never really looked for. So when you hear scurvy, you see vitamin B, I'm like, what is going on? I mean, I haven't seen Pirates of the Caribbean for years, but here we're living it, like that line from the movie, if you will.
Yeah, that is astonishing. I wouldn't think scurvy would be making a comeback, but you hear it with Dr. Joe. And if you have a question for him, you can reach us at 904-549-2937. We have a call from Julie on the South Side. Good morning, Julie. Go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Joe. I have fibromyalgia, and I am just wondering if there is anything coming down the pipeline for those who have fibromyalgia that alleviates pain without using opiate medicines. I just don't want to take the opiates, but living with the pain is no fun either. So,
Julie, sorry to hear about that. Dr. Joe, for people who don't know what fibromyalgia is, will you tell us what it is? Do we know what causes it?
We don't know what causes fibromyalgia, but it is very common. It is a condition where is this kind of chronic, persistent pain, typically in and around muscles. That's where the term myalgia, anything with Mayo, it suggests muscles, if you will. And it's just, it is very unpleasant. It can be debilitating for folks. Some people believe it is an overreaction to pain fibers, and for some reason they overreact to any type of movement and things of that sort. And it's very difficult to manage because we still don't have all the answers to it. Julie, I hear what you're saying, and what I will say is that, number one, the first thing we try to do in fibromyalgia is try to find ways not to overextend use of opiates and things of that sort, because opiates are probably not a good choice. But I know when people are hurting, you're looking for anything. Number two, it's a very you need to this has to be approached from a multidisciplinary approach. This is one of those conditions that, yes, non-opiate medications, pain medications, and one did recently come out a few months ago, not just for fibromyalgia, but just a pain relief agent that is non-opiate. I'm waiting to see what that looks like in terms of use, but so there is stuff coming out there. But this is one of those conditions that has to be managed not only with help with pain meds that are non-opiate, but needs things like physical therapy. It needs a whole row of different approaches, because you have to keep moving, but you may not want to move because everything hurts when you're doing it. So I feel for you, Julie, in this regard, but there are options there. This is one of those things that people are trying to find better approaches, because not one thing is necessarily going to take care of it, but multiple different ways of attacking it. And I will say, this is one of those areas that I've seen grow a lot in terms of just the number of people who are diagnosed with it. Another area that I would just point out for context purposes.
We've got a call from Michael on the north side. Good morning, Michael. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Yes, I just wanted to ask about if you're, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but the dangers of microplastics to our health relative to things we drink. Because I've always heard we should avoid plastic or bottled water, because it contains microplastics and whatnot. But then there's so many other liquids that come in plastic bottles or containers, milk, apple juice, Gatorade, all these different things. So should we just be avoiding liquids in plastic bottles in general, or is the risk to our health, is that somewhat overblown?
It's a good question, Michael.
I love this question, Michael. I will tell you, just this morning, there was a headline that I was just looking at where they had looked at prostate cancers, and they had found in this study of prostate cancers with the prostate actually from pathology. So they actually have the tissue, and they found this overblown number of microplastics within these prostate cancer tumors. So your question is right on the money. I don't know how to kind of respond in terms of causality, how that relates or not, but we are swimming in it. And so it's easy for me to say, yes, everything has to be in glass bottles, but our whole life, if you will, is arranged around plastic bottles.
You've got a plastic
I have one
bottle
right in front
here
of me, as I'm drinking from it. We should be trying to avoid it where we can. That's where the refillable containers, glass containers, those are better for the environment anyway, because they're recyclable and things of that sort. But even doing that, this is going to be one of those areas where you need a big deal of policy change to force folks to not offer everything in those containers, and we are awash in plastics. So yes, we are now finding that those microplastics, and I gave you a prostate cancer one. If 2 months ago it was about heart disease, we're seeing it in the world of dementia. So yes, this is a concern. We don't know all the answers around it, but we should, if we can, try to avoid using plastics where we can for things that we're going to use like water and other types of foods, because just stay tuned. That's all we keep finding in all our studies most recently.
We have a follow-up question from Emily on Facebook about that, saying at this point, microplastics are found everywhere.
Yep.
I think I heard newborn placenta has been found with microplastics. When do we worry about how much we should change in our lifestyle? I think it's worth noting, Dr. Joe, in part in response to that there are certain situations where plastics can be more digestible or can be more of a hazard when they're in deteriorating Tupperware, for instance, or
Right.
if they're exposed to heat. Certain circumstances where they can be more easily absorbed and perhaps more hazardous.
Yeah, so they've come out like with some of these forever plastic type of or chemicals that are forever chemicals that are found in some plastic versions. That's where you have heard things like cooking utensils that have that black plastic. Those are now known to be more problematic because of the way they deteriorate with constant heat, like what you just mentioned, Ann. But to the point from our listener, I will say, yeah, we are awash in this. This is one of those that if I had to suggest anything to Mr. Kennedy or Secretary Kennedy, what a great platform to really focus on something like this, because this could make a big impact on health from a policy perspective, because we don't know. We just don't know. But common sense tells me exposure like heat and things of that sort are going to be problematic, especially when you're using it for cooking utensils and things like that.
It is probably something that's going to have to be led by a regulatory push as opposed to
Totally.
just a medical one, though.
Absolutely. This is because, as everyone's pointed out, we live in it. And so this is the type of stuff where EPA and things of that sort really make a difference for our health.
Sure. I actually recently heard a speaker talking about Tanzania, which has outlawed plastics. And so there are places where their push is coming from a regulatory standpoint. And it is possible. It's certainly not easy or
No.
cheap necessarily, but it
No.
is certainly possible. You mentioned, the Secretary of HHS, RFK.
Yes.
There is an area that he's been advancing a discussion that is also a little bit controversial. This has to do with a keto diet.
The keto diet.
Keto
yes.
diet. Sorry, I don't even know how to
Yes.
say it correctly. So this is basically a high-fat, low-carb diet.
Yeah, so the ketogenic diet has been around since the 1920s, but it's only been studied in very specific areas. One of them I know very well from my field of neurology. It's actually a decent treatment for something like very difficult to manage epilepsy. Now, when we talk about ketogenic diet, think Atkins, and now put the Atkins diet at a higher level. Way that these diets that are very useful work is that most of your calories, we're talking about 80% of the calories you consume, have to come from fat, like olive oil, mayonnaise, things of that sort, and the rest is carbohydrate and protein. We as human beings are very programmed towards carbs and protein as opposed to ketogenic. Having said that, what this diet does when you do something like that from a dietary standpoint, it shifts the way that your brain uses energy. It tricks it to think like you're starving and starts breaking down fats. And the byproducts of those fats, the ketones, that's why it's called ketogenic, that serves as the energy source. And when that does it, it seems to have some positive benefit. So Secretary Kennedy pointed out maybe that's a treatment for schizophrenia. Well, we don't know that because we don't have trials.
Well, I think the term he used was cure.
No, this is what the thing about keto diets is, that you have to stay on it for a long time and maintain it. I'd love it if there was a cure, but that's what they're talking about in that direction.
Okay. And so he had said a doctor at Harvard had cured schizophrenia using keto diets. That apparently is not the case. The doctor that he was referring to at Harvard, who's an assistant professor of psychiatry there, said that while he appreciates the secretary's enthusiasm, he's never claimed to cure schizophrenia. So ketogenic diets show promise, including for things like schizophrenia and bipolar, but there is not evidence of a cure.
No, boy, I wish there was, but no, I applaud the Harvard professor for stating it in exactly the same that I would have done it, very politely. I'm happy that he's thrilled and interested in it, but we don't know.
I just want to read an email from Marty. He followed up on our discussion about people reaching outside traditional medical care, saying that because of the cost, people might be looking to save money, and perhaps that's why they are, and especially because they're sometimes limited to very brief appointments, that they might now be looking outside of that realm. And is that a contributing factor for why people are reaching to influencers, for instance?
I love that point, and the answer is yes. The healthcare system, is in dire need of giving people more time, more attention at a better price. And that there's just no way around it. So yes, when you can't get in to see your doctor, when it takes months and weeks, or you can't afford whatever is being prescribed, that is the natural inclination, is to find other approaches and other methods. And sadly, this is where things have kind of seeped into systems. So I 100% agree with that assertion.
A couple things just to shift gears very briefly. One, that they're finding that people who have used weight loss drugs might be more inclined or more successful at exercise, which is really fascinating. They're finding that perhaps people have been put off by weight, perhaps more than motivation. They're often dinged for not being motivated for exercising, but they're finding as the people lose significant amounts of weight, they've actually started to enjoy exercising.
I love that this is one of the positive byproducts of weight loss drugs. A lot of times, exercise just sounds like when you are doing it for the sake of just losing weight, if you will. All then it's like, you're tired. You're thinking, if I do it for another 2 hours, and then maybe I could give myself an ice cream cone, which completely kind of invalidates it. But when you're not so worried about the calorie count, the time, then somehow that exercise becomes less of like the albatross around your neck.
Yeah.
And you can kind of take it for the positive parts.
What's interesting, I think, too, is that they've found that exercising is harder for people who weigh more. It is not as easy to climb on the Stairmaster or run if you're carrying extra weight. And so they're actually working much harder than people who are in a position that is less cumbersome to carry around. And so part of what they're discovering in the exercise is that it's easier.
And that is one of the things that I think no one would have necessarily predicted out of it. So I love the fact that they're finding this. It makes sense to me because it just changes your relationship to movement, if you will.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Joe, we love having you on. I have much more to talk about, but we'll have to save it for another month. Dr. Joe Sirven, he is the host of the WJCT program and podcast, What's Health Got to Do with It? You can find it wherever you get your podcasts that you love. And you can also find it on our station on air Saturdays at 4. Dr. Joe Sirven, thanks so much for being here.
Can't wait till April.
All right.